This presentation will go through acid reactions. When you have heartburn, taking an antacid tablet brings some relief because there's a reaction between the acid in your stomach and the bases within the tablet. What happens is the acid and the base neutralise each other and they form salt, a type of salt, not necessarily table salt, and water. And if the acid reacts with a metal, then normally hydrogen gas would be formed. There's one exception to this. If you put copper into nitric acid, you'll actually get nitrogen dioxide rather than hydrogen. But normally, an acid and a metal will form hydrogen. And if you mix a carbonate, something like lime, with acid, then the bubbles that form will contain carbon dioxide. Acids and metals. As we said, acids can corrode metals and they usually break them down into a salt and hydrogen gas. An example of that will be shown in the next slide. And here we have hydrochloric acid reacting with metal, and in fact it's iron, and you can see the bubbles of hydrogen gas. So, if we're looking for an acid and metal, it forms a salt and hydrogen gas. And good examples of those are hydrochloric acid and magnesium, forms magnesium chloride, which is the salt and hydrogen gas, and you can see the reaction below it. Another one is sulfuric acid and iron, and that produces iron sulfate, which is the salt plus hydrogen gas. Salt is normally the term used for sodium chloride, which is table salt, the stuff you put on your chips. In these reactions, it is used in a much more general way. A salt is simply a metal ion with a non-metal ion joined together to make a compound. So any compound formed by a metal taking the place of hydrogen atom in an acid becomes a salt. And examples of these are potassium nitrate, magnesium sulfate, and calcium chloride. And these are all salts, and they can be formed by reacting an acid with a metal. Neutralization reactions. This is where an acid and a base neutralize each other when they're mixed, and changing each other into harmless substances such as water and a salt. So the basic reaction says acid plus base forms a salt plus water. So nitric acid plus potassium oxide forms potassium nitrate, which is the salt and water. Or sulfuric acid and sodium hydroxide forms sodium sulfate, which is the salt plus water. That feels better. Heartburn is caused by hydrochloric acid from your stomach rising into your esophagus or food pipe, and it burns it and irritates it. Antacid tablets contain bases, something like magnesium hydroxide or aluminium hydroxide, that reduce the acid and take away that burning sensation. And there we have the idea of the stomach with the acid in it, and if it is allowed up the esophagus, then you'll feel that burning of heartburn. When we mixed acids with carbonate, the reaction between those two produces carbon dioxide as well as a salt and water. So the general equation is acid plus carbonate forms a salt, water, and carbon dioxide. An example of that is hydrochloric acid and calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is actually lime or marble, same thing. When those two react, it forms calcium chloride, which is the salt, plus water and bubbles of carbon dioxide. So if you ever tip acid onto concrete and you see the bubbles form, that's exactly what's happening. And here we have a bit of chalk, which contains calcium carbonate, and when we put it into hydrochloric acid, you see the bubbles of carbon dioxide, and it's forming calcium carbonate, which is the salt, and more water. Calcium dioxide is also produced when acids react with hydrogen carbonates or bicarbonates, and for instance vinegar, acetic acid, and baking powder or baking soda, or carb soda if you like to call it, which is sodium hydrogen carbonate. When they mix, you'll get a bubbly froth of carbon dioxide bubbles, and the reaction is shown below. And finally, here's an example of sodium bicarbonate or carb soda, or whatever you like to call it, adding it to vinegar and seeing that frothing, because the vinegar is reacting with which is the acid, is reacting with the hydrogen carbonate or bicarbonate and forming carbon dioxide and water and a salt.